Hey everyone, my guest today is Julie Benko. Julie is an actress, singer, and writer. She played Fanny Brice in the most recent Broadway revival of Funny Girl. She is currently starring on Broadway again in Harmony, the Barry Manilow, Bruce Sussman musical. Julie's other Broadway credits include Fiddler on the Roof and Les Mis. She has played many leading roles off-Broadway and in regional theater. She performs in concert all over the country. Her new EP, Christmas with You, drops today, December 1st, 2023. It is a glorious EP that she recorded with her husband and musical partner, Jason Yeager. Julie, welcome to Little Known Facts. I am so thrilled to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. So, there's so many things that we are going to talk about today, but let's start with the fact that I happen to have the great luck and fortune to have you on the day you're giving birth to Christmas with You. So it has such a I was reading some sort of blurbs about it, and I really feel like somebody wrote like it's a way to trick people who think they don't like jazz into liking jazz. It's like putting vegetables in some kind of, yummy dessert. I don't know anyone who likes jazz, but for the who doesn't like jazz, I should say.
I was like, well, yeah. My poor jazz musician husband is. I think that's how he feels a lot of the time.
No, that was a strange. The opposite. We have jazz going all the time here in this house. But tell me, like this record, these songs, and then we're going to get into Fanny and Ruth and all the incredible characters that you've played recently.
Well, I had the idea a while back of doing an album of Christmas music, all written by Jewish composers, which is also like easy to do because all of the best songs are written by Jewish composers. And then we were doing this 54 Below concert last year for the holidays, and I suddenly got this idea. I was like, well, wait, I'm a Jewish composer. I should write a song for the holidays too. And so I wrote this song, and I got this idea like on the subway on the way to Funny Girl. And I started singing, into my notes app on my phone, or voice memos. And then I got to Funny Girl, and there was this little like closet that was backstage where they stored all the understudy costumes. And it had like, just a light bulb in the middle of and there was no like heat or AC or Wi-Fi or anything, but it was like the only place, because I shared a dressing room with all the other standbys and swings. There were like 9 of us. We called it the treehouse. So if anybody needed peace and quiet, you would go in there into this like closet that we called the asbestos room. And because we didn't see asbestos, but it certainly felt like we felt it. Yeah. So I went in there and I shut the door and I wrote the rest of the song. And I made this little demo with lots of, me singing all the different harmonies and stuff. And I sent it off to my husband. I said, and he was like, oh my God, I love this. We have to do it in the concert. So we did it in the concert. And then, he was like, we should record this. And so we were thinking about recording it as a single, but then we had these other arrangements we'd done at the concert that we were really excited about, like for Man with the Bag. And then we said, well, let's do that. And then we had just learned Tumbala Laika, which is a Yiddish folk song I had done a Hanukkah celebration for the JDC, which is one of the largest Jewish humanitarian organizations in the world. And they had, said, oh, well, if you'd like to sing Tumbala Laika. And I said, I don't know that song, but I'd been doing Yiddish on Duolingo for a couple of years. And I said, I want to put my Yiddish to use. So we had learned that song and done it for that event, and we loved it. And so then I was like, let's do a version of it that sounds like us, that sounds like New Orleans jazz, which is like my favorite kind of jazz. And so suddenly we were like, wait, I think we have an EP. And so we ended up, and then while we were like, well, we're here, let's do Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas as a duo, which is a song we do together anyway. So we were like, oh, we have an EP, we recorded it all in one day. And that's how it was sort of born, was from that first song, I Never Had a Christmas with You, that I wrote in the closet at Funny Girl. And it titles the record Christmas with You.
This is all so incredible. And I feel like, just the idea that you and your husband get to create something together. I feel like that's just so special to have not only a love match, but a creative love match in that way. This is so random, but I got to see you guys perform at Ned Eisenberg's memorial. I
Yeah.
actually met you there for a moment, and I just could see like just the really beautiful way you guys connect with each other. And I just personally, I'm a big fan of that, just finding ways to connect in a relationship, because if you're creative together, like it never gets stale. There's always this other part of your relationship that can grow. And I just think that's really beautiful. So I want to talk to you about, it is not lost on me that in the moment where one of the things you've become so celebrated for is being sort of an out Jewish performer, and so vocal about your own history and your family and your relationship to Fanny Brice and different characters. Ruth, you're playing right
Yeah.
now
There she is.
in
There's Fanny.
Harmony.
She's
There,
she's right above me right
oh,
there.
above you, always,
Right
always.
there.
Yeah, and so the idea that it's hilarious that the album you come out with, of course, is a Christmas album on the
I know.
heels of all of this, but I appreciate that.
Well,
I wanted
Barbara has her, it's a classic
It's
thing that,
classic. I know. I love it. And right, you are in great, great company. And they're just great songs. And to your point, it is such a blending of histories and cultures. And I want to talk about sort of how I found you, which is you were one of the early adapters of understanding sort of how social media and TikTok can be a way to meet your audience, not just outside a stage door, but sort of share like really personal triumphs and lows and sort of what it is day to day to have been in this incredibly popular topic, which was the revival of Funny Girl on
Mhm.
Broadway. And you were at the center of this thing because you started to go on. And it is a moment, I would say, post COVID in general, there was such a newfound respect and celebration for standbys and understudies. There was a way in which it used to be very like secretive, don't tell anyone, we don't want the audience to know. And then as far as I was concerned, it should become like a Tony category, right? Like the
Yeah.
true heroes of the shows, especially coming out of this like incredibly devastating, tumultuous time,
Mhm.
COVID. So I'm curious, um, how did you start making this connection between your audience and this platform called TikTok that I, as an older person, was less familiar with, but you seemed so articulate and comfortable with?
That sounds crazy to me because I don't know what I'm doing, but um, my mom teaches high school Spanish, and she had been telling me for years, "You have to get on TikTok. That's where all my students are." And I was like not listening to her, and I just didn't really pay much attention to it because I really wasn't that into social media, if you can believe it. And I was putting out my last album, Hand in Hand, which my husband, it's all duets with my husband, which we also play some other instruments. So it's not just piano voice, but uh, like I learned clarinet in the pandemic and I do put some clarinet on some songs there. But
By
anyway,
the way,
so I
the
was,
Duolingo Yiddish on the daily did not get lost on me either among your other hobbies, but we'll circle back to that another
yeah.
time.
So, yeah, I was putting out that album and it was actually my label said to me, it seems like you don't really like social media. And I was like, that's true. And they said, well, that's really how people connect to their audiences now. And that's what the present is. And that's what the future is. And, you know, we really would suggest that you give it a go and just try. And if you really hate it, you can hire somebody to do it. I said, I'm not, I'm not doing that. It has to be authentic. It has to be me. And so I said, well, okay, I guess I'll try. And so I just opened up a TikTok and I started the TikTok. It was like right when Funny Girl opened. And I just also thought to myself, well, this is a nice way to document this time, which I had no way of knowing was going to be so transformative for me personally. But I just thought, well, worst case, I'll have a record of what happened during Funny Girl. And so that appealed to me. So I just was kind of trying to think, well, it's sort of like, it's like the vlogs of the old days. And this way I'll be able to look back in 10 years or 20 years, because I'm no good at scrapbooking and journaling. I'm just not. So I thought, well, at least this way I'll look back and have something. And then it became something else, which it sort of provided a glimpse into what it was like to be an understudy, to just work on Broadway, the day to day. And I started to learn to have fun with it, and find the things that I thought were interesting to share with people. And then it sort of took on a life of its own. And, I go out to the stage door after Harmony now, and I hear every day people are like, I missed you in Funny Girl, but I've been such a fan of you from your TikToks. Or sometimes I just see people on the street who go, oh, you're Julie Benko, I know you from TikTok. I never saw the show, but I really enjoyed your TikToks. And so I learned that there's like this power of communication through this platform. And weirdly, like, I've made friends on TikTok, and which I never thought, oh wow, you make friends with strangers on social media. That was not me before. And now I have. And I, whether there's a random somebody who I made friends with from singing duets with, and then other creators, voice teachers, or sort of public figures who we've just sort of found each other via TikTok. And it's been very surprising.
I want to even go back, and then I really want to deep dive into Ruth, because I read that her daughter came to the show, which I
Yeah.
was like, okay, wait a minute. That just tells a whole story about her character's we lose track of what happened to everyone
Mhm.
post-war. And so just even hearing Ruth had a child really blew my mind. So I want to talk about that in a moment, if you don't
Mhm.
mind. But I just do want to stay with Funny Girl for a second, because when that show was first being cast, even the idea that of all the women in New York and the world auditioning, I assume, well, I shouldn't assume. I don't know if Beanie was already cast when you auditioned for the role, or if you even knew who was cast. Did you?
Yes. Yeah. She had been announced before I ever got an audition. And when they announced that she was playing the role, I wrote to my agents and I said, if there's a standby, I'd love to go in. And they couldn't get me an audition for many rounds. I mean, they were seeing lots and lots of girls for the standby. And I think Beanie had been cast for a long time, but they were seeing all these girls for the standby, and I could not get in the room. I'd already been in multiple Broadway shows, and I was like a Jewish girl who sang. Like, I was like, why can't I get seen? And I couldn't get in. I couldn't get in. And finally, I mean, they were getting pretty close to rehearsals. And I finally got a self tape, and I put it on tape. And then 2 weeks later, I heard you have a callback. And I went in for my callback. And I mean, I barely sang anything. I sang half of The Greatest Star, and I sang the song People, and I did 2 little scenes. And then I got the role. Like, from one callback. Now, I knew Michael Mayer. We had done, I did the Spring Awakening national tour. So he knew me from that. Although, I was a swing on the first national tour. I don't think he ever saw me go on in any of the roles,
Right.
but we had a history, so maybe that helped not need to go for count. But you would think for Fanny, like, oh, there should be like 8 callbacks and I should have to do the entire. Nope. I mean, it was not that much material, but I think that also shows sometimes the people who have been at this a long time, they know they don't need to see you perform the
The
whole
entire show.
show. They can get it from like 1 or 2 scenes. They get it. They just know, okay, that's who that is.
And when you went on for the first time, did you know you were going to be going on?
Yes. I knew that I was going on for a whole weekend, and it was right after opening. So we opened on like a Sunday, and then I was going on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Beanie had some personal days, and so my put in rehearsal was supposed to be Thursday, and then I was going on Friday. But then I woke up on Thursday morning at like 7 a.m. with like this gut, my gut was just and I get this text from my stage manager, call me. And then it turned out that Ramin, who played Nick Arnstein, had COVID. So she said, we're using today's put in for Nick's standby, Jeremiah James. So he did the put in with Beanie that day, went on with Beanie that night. And then they gave me my put in the next day on Friday. And then I went on that night. So I did my put in, and that afternoon sort of rested, and then went on in the evening and went on for the whole weekend.
With Ramin's
understudy, Jeremiah James, who, the joy of that was like, we had been in our dressing room running through stuff together. So we were comfortable together. And, Ramin, the next time I went on was like 2 weeks later, and we had never done anything together. So
you're like, who are you?
Yeah. So, I mean, we did like Miss together, but we'd never done this show. And it was funny because it was like, oh, I guess let's go down right before the show starts and run through Who Are You Now, the duet. And we just sang through it, and he went like, oh, this is going to be fun. And it was really one of my best friends came to see the show that night, and she was like, watching Ramin watch you was really fun. We ended up having a great time together and great chemistry, and it was just really a blast.
It's all terrifying to me just hearing it, but I'm really glad that it was fun for you. Okay. So if anyone wants to know more about Julie's journey in Funny Girl, she was on every news program, every morning show. She has a TikTok, as she said, that documented that journey. And so you can catch up if for any reason you were living under a rock and didn't know what was happening. But now Harmony is a Bruce Sussman, Barry Manilow musical that's been around for a really long time. And maybe you're probably just so skilled at this now to give like a really brief description of the world of the show. And then I want to talk about your character in it, Ruth. So can you just give like a brief description of the universe that is Harmony?
Yes. So Harmony follows a real singing group that existed in the 1920s and 30s. They were a German singing group that were world famous. They toured Carnegie Hall and all this stuff. And then it follows what happens to them after the Nazis come to power in the 1930s, because half of them are Jews and half of them are Gentiles. And it basically just follows how the Nazis silenced them. And I play Ruth, who is the Jewish Bolshevik wife of one of the non-Jewish characters, one of the members of the group, who's also the pianist and composer of the group, which I just find very funny because I'm, obviously married to a pianist composer in real life. And so I exclusively marry pianist composers on and off
on stage and off. Exactly.
Yeah. But so our relationship, the story of our relationship is sort of what happens to this interfaith marriage when someone is not going to stand up for their partner who is from the minority oppressed group. There's another love story of an interfaith couple where the man is Jewish and the woman is a Gentile, and they go on a different journey. So there's these two couples are sort of juxtaposed in their journey and how they respond to what's going on, in major global events.
So this is a real group that really lived. I don't know if Barry, your good friend Barry Manilow. So did you get to know Barry during this process?
Yes, I did. I spent many hours with him recording the cast album. Just me, Barry, and Bruce. He would be like, "That sounded great. Go in and do it again. Go in it again."
Like, okay, Barry Manilow, I will.
Yeah.
So there are all of these fans in the audience. They're fanalos, I think they call themselves.
Yes, that's what they call them.
Was not aware of them until I went to the show. I knew there were Barry Manilow fans. I didn't know what their name was. And it was really fascinating because I would say I was surrounded by 50 women who follow Barry wherever he goes. And so they happen to be coming to harmony, but it really had nothing to do with the subject matter of harmony. And so
Mhm.
being surrounded by people who came in for Barry, who's not in the show, by the
Nope.
way, but maybe for a glimpse of Barry in the audience. And then to kind of watch them go from, we could be in Vegas online for a Barry Manilow concert, to this unbelievable emotion that they are suddenly filled with and like undone by, as we all are, but just the juxtaposition of people who are there because they know the content of the show before they come in, and then people who wander in for really different reasons, and suddenly this collective communal experience of going, oh my God, this is like, these are real people. This is a real story. It's
Mhm.
so timely. I mean, it's always timely, obviously, but we're living in a moment where, themes of anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim, anti-everything that seems other to anyone is just permeating our culture. So it's all the more poignant and painful to watch. But I guess I wonder, how much did you get to know about these real life people? Um, there are no spoilers here, but it's hard to kind of track what happened to each person once the
Mhm.
war was over. So tell me what happened to Ruth,
Well,
as
so
far
Ruth
as you
is
know.
so Ruth is an interesting character because unlike all of the other principals who are really based on the person who lived,
Okay.
Ruth is an amalgamation of a few different people.
Okay.
And so Bruce kind of imagined a different outcome based on, what necessarily really happened, quote unquote, because he was mixing different things together.
Got
So
it.
um Erwin Boats, who is the character who I'm married to in the show, he goes by Chopin is his nickname. He really was married to a Jewish woman, but her name was Ursula, not Ruth, his first wife. And um, Ursula was the one who, so they divorced after the Nazis came to power. She got out of Germany. She went to England and then eventually came to the US, where she remarried and had children. The daughter was the one that I tracked down.
Okay.
Ursula became a hat designer and a jewelry designer. And I actually bought a couple of her hats. I found them. I found like one on Etsy and I found some, so she became this successful designer. Her husband he was a writer, but she didn't have any children with Chopin, her
Okay.
first husband.
Okay.
When he remarried, actually a non-Jewish woman, his second wife's name was Ruth.
Got
Um,
it.
but Ruth is really named for Bruce Sussman's next door neighbor, who's a 90-year-old or 95-year-old Holocaust survivor. And so he named Ruth for her. And he did a lot of interviewing of her because I think she grew up in Leopoldstadt, actually.
Huh.
And then he also basically gave this character the political activism, which I don't think either the real Ruth or the real Ursula really possessed. And so he, was trying to, I think, paint the picture of some of the political feelings of the day, and
Right.
show, I think, that there were people out there opposing the Nazis, and the Bolsheviks were like the major enemies of the Nazis, although Nazi stands for National Socialist, so it's funny because you think like socialist, Bolshevik, like they should be the same, but they were the Nazis were obviously fascists, but they came out of this idea of socialism, and the Bolsheviks are on the other side of it. So Ruth would have been the kind of person that Hitler hated the most, a communist and a Jew, both. So I had this sort of task as an actor to pick and choose what was useful to me from history, from the real people who lived, and to make up my own stuff that was helpful. So I did some research on, women in the Bolshevik Party, and it was the KPD in Germany, and I learned a lot about how actually it was mostly women were not that welcome in that party. And the women who were in the party were doing a lot of the sort of grunt work, just sort of passing out flyers. They weren't allowed to do very much. However, it was briefly led by two women. The party was briefly led by two women. So it's like, what kind of woman succeeds in that kind of environment was really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And then I found, having found Ursula's daughter, I interviewed her about her mother, and Bruce didn't base Ruth very much on the real Ursula,
Right.
but it was very helpful to hear just about her. And one of, Ursula's daughter, her name's Baron, she told me, she was like, my mother didn't talk about her past at all. She never would bring it up, which is very
Wow.
common for
Yeah.
people who survived. And they just left the past in the past. It was too painful. And but she said she had an imperiousness about her, which was not could be a very unlikable quality. And I thought that was really useful to hear and really useful to play, because Ruth, whether you think she's likable or not likable, it's none of my business, but Ruth thinks she's right about everything, and really has a lot of, I think, anger and resentment for people who don't agree with her, which is her husband. And so that was a very useful sort of quality to infuse into Ruth. And then also just to hear about the age. I mean, she said, yeah, my mother married Irwin Boates when she was 18. And so to think of Ruth really seeing her at 18 and then seeing her grow, into a young woman, was helpful to think of it in terms of, okay, well, why is she marrying? Why is she trying to get out of her house? Is
Right.
she
Right.
that
What's
kind of,
going on?
there's
Yeah.
so much like work I did to fill in the backstory for myself that nobody needs to know except for me. But it was very helpful for me and Blake, who plays opposite me, to build our history together as a couple.
And you guys are so great together. I mean, everyone is so great together. So it sounds like, did you say Baron is her
Her
Ursula's
name is
daughter's name?
Baron. Yeah.
Baron, that she probably didn't know very much, or couldn't, her mom probably hadn't shared with her the story of this incredibly successful singing group. Like she didn't know about that.
Yeah, she's learned about it more from documentaries and books than from her mother, because her mom just wouldn't talk about it.
Has anyone else shown up at the theater with a connection to the original group that you know of?
Yes, Eric, the guy who played, so Eric is he's the one who wanted to be or whose parents wanted him to be a doctor, but he wants to be a singer. His grandchildren were there on opening night, and they're one of only two. They're two of only three surviving descendants of the comedian harmonist. A lot of them didn't have children, or their children didn't have children. So there's only three who I think are even around.
And did they have any knowledge of the Harmonists as a group? Did they know anything about their grandfather's story?
I think they did, but I also didn't get to talk to them, so I'm not sure
Okay,
about the specifics.
fair enough, fair enough. So you have gone from like Broadway hit to Broadway hit, surrounded by these incredible ensembles of beautiful, beautiful talents. And in the midst of it all, you're writing and you're creating your own music. What is like, what's next? When are you in this show until? Do you already know what's happening after this show that you can share?
I don't know what's happening after. I'll be in the show for as hoping that we run, I'll be in the show until October. But we'll
Of
see.
2024.
Yeah.
Wow.
And at least that's the plan. And I'm going to be doing some concerts here and there. Just like my husband and I are going back to Birdland in February to do our Mardi Gras shows, which we did last year. And Jim Caruso, who's like the greatest host in all of New York, we finished the concert, which we have, a full horn section, and we like can't fit our whole band on the stage.
I know it's not a huge stage there.
No, but it's so much fun. We give out, beads to everybody, and I have like New Orleans trivia and prizes and stuff. And so after we finished the concert, Jim was like, "We're doing this every year. So we'll see you next year." So we're going to be at Birdland in February on a Monday night, which is our night off from Harmony. That's February 12th. And then Jason and I are also going to be going out to the West Coast to do some concerts in April. I just took a week off from Harmony to go do that. So we'll be in LA and San Francisco. And then, I don't know. I'm working on writing some things, but I think it's one of those things where that's life as an actor. You don't know what's next. You just go on the ride and see where it takes you and see what doors open up. Your guess is as good as mine.
All
But
right.
I will say, like, I trained. It's so funny. Like, I did my undergrad. I like started in musical theater, and I went to Shakespeare and did all these other kind of training. And then I worked in musical theater basically exclusively. And
Since
then
you got out of school.
Since I got out of undergrad, and then I was like, you know what? I want to go back and really be like a straight actor. And I really want to work on that. And I went back and I got my MFA in acting from NYU. And that's a 3-year program. I spent 3 years, is like,
God bless.
long. And I got out and I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm not doing any musicals, probably, because now I'm going to be an actor. And then my first job was Funny Girl, and then out of grad school. And then I went to Harmony. And so I'm sort of hoping that for whatever's next, like, I'm not going to leave musicals. Obviously, it's like my home, but I'm also sort of hoping that whatever's next, I'll get to flex some of those other muscles that I really, I think we're building and developing while I was doing, grad school for acting, and, wherever that takes me. But it would be nice to wake up and not be constantly going,
No, the pressure of, I was going to ask you about that. You have been, my God, especially Funny Girl, where there is such an expectation and a familiarity with certain songs, and the pressure of trying to deliver, even if it was a new musical. That's a lot. It's a lot.
It is.
And so is Harmony a little easier in terms of lifestyle and the demands and your daily life?
Definitely. I still find myself quite exhausted from Harmony, mainly because I just think the emotions of what Act 2 are, and how heavy that is to feel the weight of all of the anti-Semitism in the world, on your shoulders. And I'm still working out how to sort of hold that without letting it bog me down outside of the show. But it's really tremendously exhausting just going through what I go through in Act 2, even though it's only 2 scenes. And I find that I'm really tired, but it's not the same, as Funny Girl, where, Funny Girl, I was like, it's 15 songs. You basically never leave the stage. You're constantly doing book scenes. You're doing dancing, I was, big tap numbers. You're doing, it's so physical comedy. So like Funny Girl, whenever I was on in an 8-show week, which was a lot, which was more than, I don't recommend playing Fanny 8 times a week if you're doing it sort of without an end in sight, because I was more tired than I've ever been, physically, vocally, emotionally. I would just lay in the bath, steaming, I would sort of wake up and think, there's no way I can possibly do this again. And then I would somehow pull it all together and go out and do it, and Harmony, is just not nearly as vocally or physically taxing. So while I have, the emotional weight of things on me, it's like I have a cold right now, and I've been able to get through. It's not, your favorite thing in the world to do, but it's much more doable than when you're sick and playing Fanny.
I keep thinking about just something you said at the beginning about the treehouse at Funny Girl, and sort of this strange experience you had of living in 2 dressing rooms in that way. and two communities, and sort of balancing. I'm a treehouse member and
Mhm.
I'm a member of the daily company of this
Yeah.
show. Um, did you find in time that you were able to handle both families, or your role in both families?
Yeah, I think I did. I mean, ultimately, I think it's hardest on swings and standbys in the beginning where you feel separate, and often swings and standbys are not sort of put separate in a separate room, but that's just the way that the dressing rooms were set up at that theater. And also with COVID, they really wanted us to sort of be our own bubble so that if things were going around, that we would be protected, or if we were getting it, we wouldn't spread it to. So that's sort of why we were all put together in the first place. And it created a really, I mean, we're all still really close and talk all the time. It became a really important support system for all of us. Um, but once everything starts going and people are taking vacations, especially in a long run, and people get call out sick all the time, you're like in the show with the rest of the cast a lot. So you start to feel integrated, I think pretty quickly, but the beginning is sort of hard when people haven't
Right.
called out yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Tova Felcha is like, she really took me in sort of as her daughter. She's been a great supporter and advocate for me since the show closed even. I mean, she's come and seen Harmony twice, and um, gave me notes after the first preview. Loving.
You're
But she didn't
kidding.
like,
You're
well, no,
kidding.
she didn't like, and it was a good note. I she said the way you're doing your stage blood isn't reading well, and it doesn't look realistic. So here's my guy from The Walking Dead. I want you to write to him.
I love it.
um
That's helpful.
it
That
was. And so I have a really good brand of sage blood that I use now that he
awesome.
recommended. And I don't know, I try to bring that into Harmony too. We, the all of our understudies and swings have gone on. Well, all of the swings have gone on now. Many of the understudies have gone on. It was all the swings made their debuts on the same day, in previews. All of them making their Broadway debut. It was really exciting, and so I don't know. I think I try to keep that in mind, and celebrate when they have, and when all the understudies have their first times on, because it really wasn't very long ago that I was exactly in their shoes. I know exactly how it feels. And, when people are like, how do you feel? And you're like, I don't know. Like, I'm blacked out. It's going to be great. You're not able to fully, I mean, I certainly wasn't. Like, my first
Yeah.
time on as Fanny, I really don't remember most of it. I really blacked out, but, there's really nothing like it. I mean, you just feel so alive. And then the next day you wake up and you feel like you've been hit like by a truck.
Exactly. Because Harmony is so, as you just described in Act Two, and in general, like it's a period of history. It's very dark, it's very deep. There's also so much incredible singing and
Yeah.
fun in the show
Hmm.
as well. And it's a love story. I mean, there's so much to kind of, it balances itself out, but then the inevitable is the inevitable. So as a company, I mean, have there been mishaps or anything funny? It's often when we're doing the most serious things that we need to find ways to be really light as well, for all the reasons you described. Is there anything you can share pre-show, post-show, that you guys do as a company, or any mishaps that you're like, oh my God, I go to bed and I'm still laughing about when such and such happened, that you could share?
Well, I mean, just yesterday I
As
was
it
cracking
turns
up,
out,
as it
yes.
turns out. I mean, these are little things that happen to, but when an audience is just coughing a lot, and they're
No,
coughing,
that's
and
never happened to me,
it's never
Julie.
happened.
Is that a
Yeah.
thing?
And it always happens like in the quietest moment, the most serious, tense moment or whatever. And then, you've got the phones ringing and and you're like, oh my God. And it's always in Act Two because I think people turn off their phones for Act One. They're trying to be good. And then at intermission, they turn them back on and then they forget to turn them off for the second act or something. But oh my God. I mean, it was just yesterday. Like, we're in the scene where the Nazi is threatening us and is, refuses to pick up a pen that a Jew has touched, This is like really emotional scene. I get really upset at my husband for not doing anything, for not standing up, for pushing me aside. But right when he went to do that, it was in the silence, somebody in the audience, I mean, it sounded like they were taking their final breath from tuberculosis. I mean, it was like, it was this crazy. And we all were like, and, and then we have to freeze because there's like this freeze. And then a scene happens downstage and we all have to freeze staring at each other, it was just one of those moments where I was like, I was biting my lips so hard, just thinking sad things, just think sad things,
as you're
trying
digging
not
your
to break.
nails into your own.
So hard. I mean, and it's such a silly little thing, but it's like those things, we laughed about it for the whole day,
Yes.
because
you need that.
You need it.
Well, everybody go see Harmony. Watch Julie on TikTok. Download Christmas with You and all of her other previous records. Is there a little known fact that you can share about Julie Benko before we say goodbye?
I guess my little known fact is, wait, let me pull out the exact number, is my Duolingo streak. The number of days I've done Duolingo in a row, which I'm just pulling it up so I get it exactly right. I haven't done my Duolingo yet today, but I will. 1,152 days straight of my streak on Duolingo.
And is it just Yiddish?
No, I go back and forth between Yiddish and French. I started with French and then I went to Yiddish and now I'm back to French. The streak is what's important to me more than anything. I did it on my wedding day. I mean, I'm like, and I don't have to do it long. Sometimes I just do one little lesson. It's 2 minutes.
Right.
But I love language and I speak Spanish. So it's fun to do French because it's like just different enough, but I can see the parallels. But I literally am like, oh, I see on the page how it's written, that it's like Spanish, but how it sounds is complete. Like I don't understand how to pronounce French,
Yes.
And and the Yiddish is fun too, because it's like, it sounds like German, but it looks like Hebrew. And, I went to Hebrew school, through my bat mitzvah and everything, but I don't know what any of it means. I just know how to read the letters. So it's like, I get to use all these skills that I've sort of developed over my life, but in this silly little way, that's just for me. And I think ultimately, I just want to learn to sing songs in these languages. I mean, that's really what I enjoy.
Julie, I just respect your discipline so much. I love that about you. I just love that when you go in deep.
Or at least a little bit every day. I got that from Christine Toy Johnson. Do you know Christine? She's a wonderful writer and actress. She was in Come From Away for a long time. And she played my mother in Our Town at the Weston Playhouse in Vermont. And she was like, this is a pretty common advice, but she was just, because I was saying like, I want to write, but I'm not, I just get such writer's block. And she was like, 10 minutes a day, just 10 minutes a day. And I really took that advice to heart when it came to not just writing, but anything. It's like, if you just want to do something, you just have to do it a little bit every day. And you'd be surprised how far that goes. And because I think for me, it's like, I get overwhelmed when I don't feel like I can do something right. Then I don't want to do it at all. But I've sort of switched my view, which is that, no, just do it. Just to make a practice of doing it and it will come, like the rest will come.
I'm really excited to take your masterclass. I'm signing up immediately.
Great.
Hey, this is like an amazing day. It's Christmas with You. And there's a video, and I'm sure there will be more videos, and there's concerts. So how does everyone find out all the amazing things in the Julie Benko universe? Where's the one-stop shopping?
Well, if you go to my website, you can sign up for my mailing list, and that way you really won't miss anything. And I swear, I only send stuff out when it's when there's like it's what very once in a while. I don't spam. Um, just when there's really something that you might want to know about. And but then, I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Juju Julie B. I'm waiting on my endorsement from Juju Bees. I keep asking, but I've never heard from
It's
them. But,
coming. It's coming.
but yeah,
Julie, thank you so much, especially on this special day, being here with us on the podcast, and have a great 100 million more shows of Harmony and all
thank
the
you.
concerts. And until the next time, thank you. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so lovely to chat with you.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.